Alright everyone, welcome back to Steezcast. This is episode 5. The long-awaited, big questions deep episode.
It's going to be a little bit of an unusual episode.
A little unorthodox, you might say.
Very unorganized and kind of
somewhat unconventional.
Off the tongue.
This is the first time where we've recorded when we said we were going to record. Exactly. It's the day
that is
after.
true.
It's also the first time we've recorded back-to-back, right?
First
Yeah.
back-to-back.
Yeah, 2 straight days. So.
Which is definitely something
I'm tired.
something we were not
We
capable
looked
of
at
doing.
our hour sheet and we're like, gosh.
We should get some more
You
episodes.
need to speak for yourself.
Yeah.
So
we also, special guest, Alex Crispi.
Hello, everyone. Introduce
Here
yourself.
to offer some thoughts on some deeply moral questions.
Icebreakers first, like what's your name? Like where do you go to school?
Favorite ice cream?
Favorite ice cream.
Alex. Go to school at Hackley. Favorite ice cream I think is cookie dough. You just can't go wrong.
I get off.
You cannot go wrong.
If you had to be an animal, which one would you be?
I kind of want my dog's life, honestly. My dog seems to have a really good life.
Yeah, your dog's pretty
Yeah, I
strong.
agree.
So I would do
Except
that.
then I'd be
I like
really
your dog.
We would say Crispy's an expert on this stuff, but then again,
That would be
But
a
you know what?
total lie.
I went through CCD, kindergarten,
That's true,
through
you
9th
did.
grade, passed all the sacraments except marriage and priesthood in the Catholic Church.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know either.
No.
I know certain things about the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Is basically what it means.
Look at that.
So I'm an expert in
Look at
that
that.
sense.
You know certain things about the Catholic Church.
Don't make the joke you're about to make.
oh god.
We might have to edit that out.
I know. I think we gotta start. We can't leave that in.
No, we can't. We so can't.
We can't.
Should we just get into it?
What?
Let's just get into it. Let's just get into it.
Just believe.
Just get into it.
Okay, fine.
I'll remind you that the joke that Charlie made in episode 3.
I made no such thing.
All right.
No evidence of that.
That was a really productive 2 minutes of the podcast.
We're gonna start off with a
Now that
little.
everyone has clicked off of the video.
That's the point of it. Who
Now
would
we
click
have
on?
no viewers.
It's very clear why. No, I don't think anyone's going to click on it to get to the point where they could click off of it. Because no one's there in the first place.
I think we're gonna start off with a little discussion about God, who he or she is, or they.
Or they.
So a very simple topic.
Yeah.
Very, very
We're
simple.
starting it off light.
Yeah.
Jonah, take the reins.
Yeah, so what I first want to do is start off with what everyone's like baseline belief is. So
Like religion.
religion, but also just like relationship with God and like how you view it.
Okay.
So I'll start. I'm Jewish, and I personally don't believe in an active God like being.
Do you think there was a God?
So that's sort of that's sort of my question, which is like, there's the whole theory of something had to start this.
Right.
So I think something that's
So
more
the Big
powerful
the
than
Big
us.
Bang might have been some sort
There's
of.
no evidence of what actually started the Big Bang.
Right.
All that
Right.
they know is that everything just started expanding, but no one knows why.
Right.
So
So that's why I think like maybe there was some more powerful being that started it, but I don't believe in anything active.
yeah, and does that go against Judaism then? Like what?
Yes.
What is the,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes and
Yes
no.
and no. Yes and no.
But
Yes
it's
and no.
most of
I think for the most part, Judaism is pretty vague about what God actually does.
Yeah.
Just that he is or
And-
she is there.
The thing with Judaism is also that like you can believe in a lot of different things and still have Jewish beliefs. Like
Or
it's very
Theoretically,
loose.
believe whatever you want. And
Yeah,
still-
it's very loose
Yeah.
as to like what it is, and there's a whole book of rabbis arguing with each other over like what's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me.
And the
personally.
book doesn't actually tell you who's right.
No,
No.
of course not.
It's really good framework for religion. And now, by the way, you can't eat pork or work on Saturdays.
I mean, I was raised in a Protestant household, but we're not openly or overtly religious. We go to church.
I have
probably.
one question about that.
Yes.
Did you not say a little bit ago that you weren't sure what denomination you were?
Yes. It's one of the ones that starts with a P. It's either Episcopalian or Protestant.
Episcopalian does not start with a P.
There's fully an E in there.
It's Episcopalian.
So.
I think we narrowed it down, guys. I think we did it.
So probably Protestant.
All right. Well, on
Wow,
that
that
note,
is horrendous.
Anyway,
Wow.
we probably go to church maybe like 3 times a year for Easter, Christmas, and at least like once randomly. But I personally would classify myself as agnostic. There may be something out there, but I don't think, as you said, I don't think there's like some current active being that's controlling everything. But I'm not ruling out the possibility of there being a God because I'm just not sure.
Cool. So I'm like Jonah, Jewish. That very much so, like culturally and ethnically and all that. I kind of think that like it would be a little silly of me to have an opinion on this, for the reason that, to the best of my understanding, humans are just a combination of like matter set up in a certain way, and our brains are just neurons and
Or are we
electrons.
just coded in a simulation?
Or we're just coded in a simulation.
Stay
a whole
tuned
host
for
of
that.
things. Either way,
No,
I think.
watching.
Stay tuned.
5:45. Okay, yeah.
Who is saying-
5:45 is past our average watch time. So.
Well, anyway, my with what I know about myself and how humans work, I think I should probably have intellectual humility about this and understand that I'm never going to get anywhere close to an answer. So I choose not to have an opinion.
It's very fascinating.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting.
That'll make for an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
As I said before, I grew up in a very Catholic household, like Roman Catholic, straight out of Italy, both sides of my family. We go to church.
Not the mafia.
Right?
Yes.
Not the mafia.
Are we sure then?
We are sure.
Okay.
We're not accusing Crispi's family of being in the
No,
mafia
I'm
on
not.
YouTube in the podcast.
Because if you do accuse them, then you're dead.
I was very explicit in
Hopefully
saying not the mafia. I was just making that clear to the viewers.
Hopefully the mafia is not watching.
No one's watching. We know for sure the mafia is not watching.
Anyways, my family goes to church like every week. So, I wouldn't say I fully bought in. I'm kind of similar to everyone else here. Like, I do believe that God started it all, but I don't know if I per se believe that He's like controlling every moment of your life. I like to think that like you have control over what you do, and like every bad thing, it's not because like God wanted that to happen. It's just how the world is.
Yeah.
But I do definitely think God, like a God of some form, had to start the whole universe thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with me, my like whole like church experience started when I was born, but ended
That's an awesome comment.
before the ending part.
Wow, that is great.
It definitely ended when I was like 1.5, just because I cried.
That is really specific.
Well, I cried in church, and my parents were like, "We're not doing
Do
this."
you ever get baptized?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I was-
don't think
I was
so.
never
I don't
baptized.
think so. I don't think about it.
Because you're a Protestant.
No. Most
Or do they too?
sects of Christianity get baptized.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
It's
But
just
like-
like different beliefs.
yeah.
Got it.
What it completes.
I totally thought that was like a Baptist thing.
No, it's not just Baptist.
It would make sense.
Catholics.
It would make sense
Catholics
because of the
baptize
name.
people. I was baptized
Yeah.
in the Holy Catholic Church.
Don't flex on us too hard, Crispy.
Expert over here. Expert over here. No, so yeah, I've never really gone to church, so, but I'm also kind of more with Ben, where like, I just like don't even care to form a belief on it, because like, it probably will never affect me, whether I believe it or not. I mean,
Unless God is real.
Unless
well, there's an interesting.
Well, there's the whole
interesting
paradox, or
Yeah.
not paradox,
Well,
but it's
The Pascal's
there's the
wager.
Thank
Yeah, is that the thing?
That's
where,
the, like-
I don't necessarily believe in God, but the risk
It's
is too high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the risk of not
There's
believing in God.
technically no downside to believing in God, even if there isn't a God. But if there is a God, then it's like there's four options.
Well, I
You
wouldn't,
don't
I wouldn't get to eat pork for my whole life.
Yeah.
Well, I think also the bigger downside is like resigning yourself to never forming views of how the universe works.
Yeah.
On your own.
Yeah.
Which I
But
think is a
there's
pretty
also
big
But I thought
something
you
you
just
said-
said that you don't want to do that because it's not like.
Well, I'm saying that I think, not that I don't think it's a good, I think we should try to figure it out. I just think that we shouldn't form opinions yet.
Yeah.
Or
And
at
then
least
we
so
should-
set in your beliefs that like
Yeah,
you're
we should
willing
be
to
working
kill for it.
Exactly, we should be working towards the right answer, but I don't think we have that, and I don't think we should be confident in whatever views we come to.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't
mean,
think anybody can be
nobody's
confident.
Well,
But I
people
mean-
are confident.
Well, people
So,
are, but
None of us
yeah.
here, I don't think, are confident.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. But like the argument of like how like not choosing to believe in God, you might as well do that. I mean, there are instances where like the peasants like years ago like believed in God and they were like they lived horrible lives because
Right.
they
Yeah,
were like,
totally.
I'll just believe in God and everything will be okay.
It'll all be fine afterwards.
I mean,
Well,
it
like,
totally
that kinda-
depends
that
on
definitely
your
makes sense.
situation.
Well, that I mean,
yeah.
that's why like Marx was like, it's the opium of the people. It's like people
Mhm.
are willing to live
Yeah.
terrible
Yeah.
lives because they believe that it'll get better afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of how it started, which is like you had this is the belief that you had people like very early on in our like
Human history.
yeah who felt some sort of lack of control over the lives that they had.
Yeah.
And so they created this higher power in their own mind to explain the unexplainable and give them some hope that, like, while they don't have control now, they can control what comes after.
Yeah.
So that's
Just really sad.
yeah, no, it's
Deeply
really sad. But that's one argument for, like, God was a concept that was created.
Well, it's just to justify. It's basically like an idea that's created to justify things that you can't like explain.
Right.
That's all. I mean, that personally, that's all religion is.
And also, most of these religions have been around for like 2,000 years, which is like sounds like a lot, but it's not.
Really not.
It's
It's
really
And that's
not.
the whole issue is as science gets better and better. So
Yeah.
like evolution, that's not in the Catholic Church. It was
Yeah.
like God made humans,
Yeah.
but
And
like
they fought
now
that
we're
for a
proving
long time.
evolution.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's true. Like
I mean, I think you definitely see also just like a younger generation, less and less religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
All of
I-
it, yeah.
Well, I mean, as like generally as humans change the beliefs they have over time, it's
Yeah.
not that you change people's minds; it's that the next generation start to think about things differently.
Well,
and also
with the science that we have,
it's just
And
Exactly.
their connection or proximity to the events that could be used to justify some
Exactly.
sort of religious connection, you're further and further away from those events, so you have less and less connection.
Yeah,
to
but
them.
our parents are still pretty far away from like Moses climbing the mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're even further.
Yeah,
We're
but
just
by like in the grand scheme of
20
things, like
years.
not that
it's like
long
yeah,
though.
well, it's not too
But-
bad.
I don't know.
Again, religion
I don't know if
hasn't been
it's-
around for that long.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's like if that gap of like I don't know 30 years would mark such a drastic shift.
I think we've also our scientific knowledge in between our parents' generation and our generation has is
Yes.
most of the reason, not because just time alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, looking like at scriptures, like they're all in different languages. Most of them being dead. Like in church, I know like prayers have changed from when I started to now because
Yeah.
they're like, oh my bad, we did it wrong, we translated it wrong. Like it's still changing.
right.
Well,
So it's like,
also
how
the great
real
thing
is
is
it?
Yeah.
the great thing is you can translate the text however,
However,
you want.
Exactly.
As
Yeah.
long as you're the
Come in
only
line.
one who can
Yeah.
like.
And then
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with Martin
is that how
Luther.
like different religions just kind of stem from? There's
That was the whole
different
thing
sections
with
of-
Martin Luther and
Yeah.
like the original was it Church of
Protestant
England?
Reformation.
Yeah, with the Protestant Reformation where the Bible wasn't translated into German, so nobody could read it besides priests. And then once he
They
translated
control.
it, that's what created all different sects of Christianity.
Yeah.
It was also
yeah,
the problem of indulgences. which
Well,
was,
yeah,
like,
yeah, but
like,
that-
that was a pretty rough one.
There
But
were,
that's-
there were more
that's-
specifically 95 problems.
But like that having that indulgence thing caused a big question, which is like these are the people who we've been entrusting to like tell us what's right in religion and translate these scriptures, and they're just accepting money for us to go to heaven.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that-
what was good with that?
That was a
Strange
pretty
thing.
big blow.
And that's terrible.
Yeah.
It's a
Definitely
terrible
just
look.
the idea of religion gave the church a lot of control back then. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
the fact that people
No,
like
that's
believed so
eternity.
heavily. So like
Yeah.
I mean, does that discredit it a little bit? Like that like the church was taking
Totally.
advantage
For
of this
sure.
so much.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe not. I mean, that discredits the church.
It
I
discredits
think
the
it
doesn't
church.
discredit the
It's-
religion.
Yeah.
The priest, the
But
system.
it doesn't.
But does that
per se.
does that not
The
discredit the like the?
I mean, the
actual-
system
I guess
has
it
a
does.
lot. The system has a lot of problems,
Well, obviously, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
especially the Catholic.
but I mean,
Mm.
does that
It's
not,
true, it's
would
true.
you guys make the argument that that wouldn't discredit the actual belief system behind?
Well, no, because you like
the church?
there are certain scriptures that you can interpret however you please. So
Yeah.
it doesn't like there's not one like basic religion that you can really criticize for it because each religion is kind of formulated off an individual interpretation.
Yeah.
Well, that and it also it faults the people who translate it and make it accessible for the common man, but not necessarily the belief system behind it to be wrong.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, on that note, sort of what I always thought was funny is that people believe the religion that their parents do, and there's really no reason why one would be more persuaded by the religion of their parents than the religion of literally any of the other hundreds of thousands of religious texts that exists. So
That's
like,
true.
why is
It's
it that
nature
way?
versus nurture.
Well, yeah, and also I think that's not true with just religion. I think a lot of things you
Yeah.
kind of take after your parents' belief.
Oh, yeah.
That's your primary belief, and then you have to go against what you were
Yeah.
taught as a
I
child.
mean, I think with religion though, it's like they baptize kids very young,
We do.
like because that kid's figured it out yet. Like, they
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
They know.
They
how
want to
die.
be baptized.
Yeah, they've made that choice. Like I.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. But the argument like for it, I guess, is that like the religions around the world are like largely the same.
Yeah, there's a lot
Very
of
similar.
commonality.
They're very
yeah.
similar. But what's funny to me is that many of them were created before a time where these peoples had really communicated or come in contact with one
Yeah.
another, and they all sort of come to the same general principle.
Yeah, that is true.
I mean,
how- yeah.
all monotheism comes from Judaism.
Yeah,
So
yes.
But I mean, even monotheism is different, obviously. But even
Yeah.
if, like the Aztecs, who believed in
Ah.
the host of gods, that either could be that we only think of God as the concept because of language and the way that we've translated the historical records, but it also could be that like they have the same ideas. Like why?
Well, I think because, again, if we're using gods to justify things we don't understand, everyone at the time, like the Aztecs and the Mayans, are
Yeah.
experiencing the same either, like, weather patterns or stuff like that, or, like, geological extremes, and then because of that, they need things to justify it, so they come up with not necessarily the same gods, but things that can represent the same events that are happening to
Or
them.
rather, the same explanation.
So what does it mean for the existence of God if God is an intrinsically human response to the uncertainty of the universe? Like,
So that would suggest that God is only what we make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but why? I think, or it could be the opposite, that if God is the inevitable response to like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Then maybe that's an argument for the existence of God. If the universe exists the way it does for a certain set of reasons, it would make sense if the way we all respond to the universe is by coming to the exact same answer.
Or maybe that's just human nature. I mean, we all are humans.
But why are we this way? Right? Humans exist for
Right. So that's one of the main arguments for God, which is like things don't happen just by themselves.
Or they do.
Or they do, which is a problem.
That's
Well, the thing is,
hole.
the argument I'd make though against the whole thing that a lot of you have said, which is that how else did it start unless some God created it in the first place, is
Then
that
what created God?
What created the God? That
Yeah.
seems the existence of the gods sounds way more unbelievable to me than the existence of the world.
I
Because
agree.
at least the world is observable. I can like touch
Yeah.
it, like sense it. all that
So
stuff.
right. That's
I do
that's,
think there's a scientific explanation for the Big Bang. I personally, I mean,
Is that what you're
I don't think we can know
Yeah.
ever, but
maybe in the future.
Or maybe the Big Bang's totally wrong. Like
Yeah,
maybe.
or
Maybe
it's just a theory.
Yeah.
I mean,
all that we
a theory that we've scientifically proven by looking far enough into
yeah,
space. that we
it's
But
the
look,
theory
like-
should check out. It checks out.
Yeah.
all that we as people
It's
though
still
really
like-
know is
no.
like we can sense how light reflects off stuff. We can sense sound waves.
We can see light from when the Big Bang.
Sure, but that's
happened.
all light.
But
What
that's-
else exists?
Exactly. Like it's like I don't know.
Who knows?
So the answer to does God does it exist is who knows.
Yeah, the existence is maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely strong, maybe.
It's a strong maybe.
I'm feeling that's
I'm glad that we provided some good analysis.
Yeah. I don't know. It's
strong.
It's a strong maybe.
it's just interesting to think about how there could be like a whole another layer of reality that we would never know about, like this whole God stuff. Like
Yeah.
obviously-
Well, what's interesting is we've created like originally, yeah. If God is a human response to the way that the world works, like, and then we create a set of scientific rules, like with physics, to explain how the world actually works, but then we go small enough and disprove that those physics laws apply to everything. I mean, because you saw this, I forget what they're called, but there are certain subatomic particles that just don't obey the
Well,
laws.
in general, quantum mechanics is incompatible with
Like tachyons and stuff.
with the rules.
Yeah.
yeah.
So if that's true, then
I mean,
how do
the
we justify
laws
that?
of physics are all created
Well,
by
everything that
humans.
everything
Yeah, so, like,
that
maybe-
we know today is likely wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
physics
exactly.
could be completely wrong. We could have just wasted
Okay.
baby physics.
We have a new guest.
We have a new guest.
We may have a new guest.
Alright, do you wanna make room on the couch?
Make room on the couch. Yeah, come on in.
Oh, it's gonna get nice and cuddly.
Nice.
Yes.
Again, disclaimer: we are all vaccinated.
Against
Yes.
COVID-19. I will show you my Excelsior pass.
I do not have
As
my
I did
You
in
made the
last
same
episode.
joke last time.
No, and I've made it over 10 times.
Yes. Man.
So, Austin, you have to introduce yourself. You have to say your name, what school you go to, your favorite
Ice cream.
flavor, and if you were one animal, what would it be?
I'm Austin. I go to Hackley School.
What's your last name?
Benedetto, my last name. Was the
Ice cream.
ice cream is mint chocolate chip.
Yeah.
And animal is penguin.
Why? Give me 3 sentences.
I'd like to waddle around.
Okay, yeah, but
I-
you ever heard of leopard seals? Those things are nasty.
I like the cold, and I feel like they are good friends with each other.
Okay.
Word.
Do you think that...
the penguins.
He's giving us some
Alright, would this be like a pretty good time to transition?
We can transition.
Yeah, yeah.
Alright,
Well,
so
I mean,
just
this is a
Awesome.
very, this is
I
a
hope you
very.
have some very strong thoughts
So, yeah.
on God that you wanted to share.
No.
I mean, like, the whole death thing
yeah.
is still, like, very religious.
I'll
Yeah.
let you know,
Yeah.
Austin, that like what we came to on our God discussion is that it's a strong,
Strong
maybe.
maybe.
Strong maybe.
I feel like that's further than most people have ever gone.
Yeah.
I disagree. Alright, it actually puts us right where everyone else is.
So, given that God is a strong maybe, can we say what happens after death?
Yeah, well, that also might be a strong maybe. Or a strong no, probably.
Well, it's not a
Definitely.
maybe.
Well, that's not a question that you answer with yes or no. I asked what happens after
Maybe.
death. Maybe.
Just go straight.
Let's go. Yeah. That's
no,
a reference to when he was giving me directions driving earlier. There was a fork in the road, and he says, "Just go straight."
Dirt
anyways,
road. Dirt road.
so
The road.
just scientifically, actually no, let's go around. Let's say what we all just believe happens. After.
Yeah, that's really
So,
productive
you
because
wanna
we all
start?
know.
Well, I mean, it's just like
fun,
it's
We gotta-
no
we
one
gotta
knows, so you
isolate
might as well.
this.
It's cool. I don't know. All right, Johnny, you want to start? Oh, dude.
This is your second.
This is your segment.
All right, I think this sounds crazy.
This
I know
is going to be
it's-
the right answer.
No, I just. I
Please
just
tell
think
us what
there's,
to
like,
believe.
Some level of like reincarnation that's not like the same. Maybe not like the same soul or anything, but like you might just be a completely different person. You just live another life as a different person. You know, like I just struggle with the question.
That would explain the increasing population of
No,
us.
that's the one. Increasing population definitely doesn't make sense. But like, why am I in my body? Why couldn't I have been born as someone else and lived their life? Like after I die, like
Well,
why
like
couldn't
the what is the self question, sort of
yeah, I
is
guess.
the issue with all this.
But
Like, what are you? Or is the you the same you that existed in you 10
You have
years
the
ago?
same qualities and traits.
I mean,
So
fair.
what is you?
Like no one really knows, I guess. But like, it's more just like I'm just talking about at birth. Like, why?
Well, is the
Yeah,
you
I
that
guess-
at birth?
Why am I thinking in my body? Why couldn't I be someone else thinking in someone else's body? You know,
Sure. Yeah.
I
Like-
don't know.
no, that's just the question.
But
that I
with
struggle
genes, a lot of who you are is determined by your genes, so that kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
fair. But like, why couldn't I be someone else's gene? I'm not saying it would be
Well,
me.
then-
necessarily.
Yeah,
I'd
but
be
you-
someone completely different.
But you'd be conscious in a
But
way.
I'd be conscious.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like that's just what I think. But yeah,
Chris,
or nothing happens at all.
Oh, I'm
Just
next. I think it's very interesting to think about afterlife. I don't know if the reincarnation thing is for me
Yeah.
personally. I'm not opposed to it, because I'm not really opposed to anything.
We all don't know here.
I
None of
like
us
to-
are dead, right? Like,
I like to think there's something after, just peace of mind maybe. But if there's not, like, I'm not gonna be able to complain about it, because when I find out, I'll be dead. So
Fair enough.
I mean,
Fair enough.
I really just live my life not thinking about too much, because I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
I think I fear death enough and I'm risk averse to be confident, like at least in myself, that I'm not hedging on anything. So I say I don't believe in anything after it.
do you think it's just
Good
an
point.
abyss?
Yeah, I fear death way too much where I'm not comfortable saying that there is anything after it. So I'm gonna be as strong. There's nothing after this.
Yeah. That was persuasive to me, but
Yeah,
I was.
that was a good argument.
But the
that totally got me.
what I'll say is that I can't. It's hard to wrap your mind around what like an infinite nothingness would be. Because
Yeah.
like if there is nothing after, then there is nothing forever.
Yeah.
It's
Which
weird.
is a really hard thing to contemplate.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
But not weird enough that I'm willing to disregard that as a possibility. But like, if I'm not saying I have an answer, but if I believe that I'm just a bunch of neurons and like electrons and genes, all that sort of stuff, then I think it's more likely that there's nothing than it is that there's something.
If you Sam Harris it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I Sam Harris it, which I don't want to do. But it just happens.
I mean, I've kind of got two very polar opinions. It could be one or the other personally. I either have the same idea as Austin, where it's like there's just nothing, which again, as Ben said, it's very hard to contemplate. But the other idea is formulated based on like a story that I've heard from a close relative of mine, and I probably shouldn't let my opinion be formulated by one story. But
Because of a single story.
what?
Because of a single story.
Anyway,
It's a good
basically,
TED Talk.
I mean, should I share the story?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Basically,
No, you should just like say that
Okay,
there
well,
is
say
a
you have a
story.
story and then, like, don't
But basically, there was a friend of my grandmother's who had some sort of medical emergency, and she was on the operating table, and she flatlined.
Yeah.
And then a couple minutes, like maybe 2 minutes later, they brought her back to life, or like made her heart start again. And she described the experience as she started floating out of her body up towards the ceiling, and then just kind of stayed up near the ceiling for a while. And while she was in the room, she could see everything that was happening. And she noticed a spider in like one of the corners of a room, of the operating room, which is a little bit weird just because like
Weird thing to laugh at, for sure.
operating
No. We were talking about this yesterday.
But
Crispi shares the story.
I
not
forgot
knowing
you were the one who
this story.
told me. I was like, I haven't heard a story about
I
this.
recognize the story.
And then I was there like, oh, this is really like what I told Charlie yesterday.
Anyway, but it's kind of weird for a spider to be in an operating room, given that they're supposed to be insanely sanitary. And
It's like
once
Breaking
like the
Bad
fly.
and so once they bring her back to life, she tells them about the spider, and they go and check, and the spider's there,
That's so weird.
which is really weird. And again, I know I probably shouldn't let my ideas about death and what happens after be formulated by one story, but that personally is really convincing.
Yeah.
So I'd say I think there has to be some sort of I don't think heaven or hell, maybe some sort of purgatory that exists, or like a bardo, that's kind of just an empty, maybe just an empty, vast, open space. But I do have to say there's some sort of afterlife. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's reincarnation. But yeah.
So I would like to think that there's something after. I would like to think that's not just it for me.
Yeah.
And that's a comforting thought to like
It's-
to have that. You know, you will live another life. Because personally, I enjoy existing.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that thought, but at the same time, I personally feel like that there's no scientifically proven evidence, and I think of myself as a pretty scientifically minded person.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything that is convincing enough, and that I've like been able to see that would tell me that there is more out there, which is scary because like it's tough to imagine that like the world will just go on and that you're done, like that's it. But I think that just sort of is what it is.
Now here's a question.
We have another
Yeah,
guest.
another
We might
guest.
have another guest.
Go ahead, jump in, bud.
Charlie has room next to him.
We could probably just, I don't know.
Sit on the floor.
Yeah, sit on the floor.
Just make sure you're in frame.
Yeah.
Like sit, lean. Oh wow, we're getting real
Alright.
close.
Alright.
All right.
So,
Rudge,
this is guest number 3.
please
You have to
introduce
give us
yourself.
your name, what school you go to, your favorite ice cream flavor, and if you were an animal, which one would you be? In 3 sentences, explaining why. And you can't ask for me to repeat the question.
My name is Charles Rudge. I go to Hackley School.
Where is that?
It's in Tarrytown, New York.
What's the
Oh, I've
exact
heard of
address?
I do.
9293 Bennett Avenue.
Oh, I don't know.
Correct answer.
I actually had no idea.
10591 is the zip code.
Yeah.
I know that because it's snowed.
Yeah. I actually don't like ice cream, but I like
Sorbet.
sorbet. My favorite sorbet is
Loser.
We're
probably
not gonna have this argument.
lemon
When in Rome.
sorbet. And if I had to be an animal, I'd probably be a mountain goat. because they're tenacious, they're great climbers, they're in the mountains all the time. I really like that, and the horns are really beautiful. So.
Okay.
Alright.
Pretty good, yeah.
Alright.
So, Rudge, what happens when you die?
Yeah. What is your? We're just gonna jump right into this.
Oh, you just fade into nothingness. There's
You think
nothing.
nothingness.
Alright, so
after
he's
that.
got the same. He's got the same.
I do have a question for everyone, especially people who think there's something after.
Yeah.
Now let's just say there is like an afterlife where it's eternity. Do you want to be there for eternity? Because eternity is a long time, and like you get bored.
Yeah, honestly,
I
I
don't-
kind of find comfort in that there is an end. Honestly, like,
Yeah,
Because at a certain
more
point,
purpose.
you try everything. Let's say like the afterlife, you can try whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. For
So this is
eternity.
like the good place, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then what?
Well, I think
Looks like
Like-
that. Yeah, that's what you're saying.
What? Your life doesn't have meaning if you
that's
just
the
have
thing, right? Why if
forever.
like when
Well,
we're
what
like
gives
let's-
life meaning?
when we
Death.
think like let's do something, like we do it. If life was eternal, we could always
I'll do it
just
next
do it
week.
later.
Yes.
There's never any pressure to do anything,
Yeah.
which is why I think the end is sort of forces us to actually live.
Life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there was no
I think
end,
there-
there would be
Hashtag
nothingness.
YOLO.
I don't know.
Or do you?
At the same time, it would just I don't like the concept of not existing.
No, I get that. I'm
I'm
not saying
actually
I don't
very,
believe in
I'm
that.
very comfortable.
No.
I have too.
Not
There's nothing.
existing?
Yeah, it's fine.
Really? I don't
Yeah, I'm not a fan
I
of
thought
that, yeah.
relatives who passed away to me, and I'm just like, do they just like, are they just like
Yeah,
gone
well, that's a sad
forever?
part. That's
Right.
more-
I don't. I mean,
Well, I feel
It's
like at
different
some
though with
point
yourself,
existence
though.
becomes suffering if you live for long enough. Like let's say
Samsara type beat.
what?
Samsara type beat. You know, the what is it? Buddhism, Hinduism.
I don't know what you're
I
talking.
learned about that in 8th grade.
Oh, what?
Comparative religions.
I couldn't
Maybe
tell
it
you
is
what that
Buddhism.
is.
Maybe it's both.
They both.
might be
well,
very
they're
similar. They are
similar
intertwined.
things, Yeah.
Well, there's also an argument that all life is suffering, and we have a duty
Right.
to end life on Earth as we know it, because we're just creating more suffering for our children down the line.
That
So,
sounds
you
like.
want to just
Well,
nuke the whole world?
explain why life is suffering.
That sounds like Attack on Titan.
I was about to say that.
That totally sounds like Attack on Titan, but.
But explain why is life?
Well, death is the absence of suffering, right?
Why is life suffering?
Because we experience pain, we experience emotional hardship, right? And some would argue that it's better to experience nothing than experience any sort of pain.
But again, that's a risk
No,
because we
I
don't
think
know
pain
that
builds
death is
character.
nothing.
Yeah.
We don't know that it
Death-
is.
But it's
Well,
also like you
it's
have to
something
experience-
new.
you Experience happiness.
I disagree.
No,
because
part of it
death
is-
is the absence of pain. You shouldn't be afraid of death.
But we don't
because-
know that.
Yes, we do.
Just the absence of
How do
happiness.
we know death is the absence of pain?
Because
No,
there's
the-
no hell.
The whole
There's
thing,
no
though.
God.
Well,
How do we
that's-
know that?
That's a belief system.
The whole thing though there is that every time you get something new and acquire the happiness, it doesn't last, it fades. And that's the whole thing with that, is that you get new ambitions and new things you want to do. Like most people don't ever just find a state of eternal bliss and happiness, and that's the whole life is suffering.
Well, it's like we're in a state of endlessly striving for
exactly.
stuff.
And no
never
matter
reach
when you get what you want, you're gonna want something
That's
new.
striving causes suffering.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. And that is the Buddhism thing too.
I think that's a little bit of a sad outlook to have on life.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I also kind of think that like if we're assuming that life is here and then we eventually die, we might as well just enjoy it, because if there's no other meaning,
Yeah,
why
I
not?
think maybe just don't worry about it at all. Like don't. It's just kind of like what we were talking about with like a God. Like, yeah, maybe we should as like a group, as a like world, maybe take strides to figuring out these like questions, but like just like on a personal level, I would have your life dictate.
I don't know if I'd want to know the answer to these questions personally,
Yeah.
because
Would you? Oh, that's interesting. Would you? If
No,
you
I
could
totally
find
would.
out.
I kind of like
would
the
you?
ambiguity.
Please tell me.
No, but would you
I mean,
want to?
Of
Yeah.
course I would. If,
Yeah.
if there's a heaven or hell, I'm gonna be
That's
the most
just-
godly
why-
man.
Well, I think
That
you
is-
shouldn't
that
count
is
that.
true.
I think you shouldn't get to heaven if you suddenly change how you act when you find out it's real.
well, that's the thing. If
I think if you find
Well,
out for sure it's real,
I saw this in
and then you change your character, that's not who you really
Like,
are.
if
Do you become any less of a good person if the intent is different?
yeah, I think totally.
Yeah,
That's why
I agree.
think this heaven hell thing kind of silly. Like, if
If
you're
you
just
get
doing
some consequentialism versus deontologism.
Wait, what do you say?
Didn't know what any of those words meant.
Consequentialism and deontology.
That's what. Yeah, this is. Yeah. Well,
What
I
he
think
said.
consequentialism is generally dumb, but my argument on this would be that like if you're doing good things to go to heaven or hell, then like you haven't done anything good.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's not because then you're doing it for your own gains,
Yeah.
and that's not really.
Does that
You're
change
not-
the
but
effect of
maybe
it?
your
Was that
own
good?
gains
Well, I don't understand why the effects of it should matter.
society. Like,
Journey
everyone's-
over destination.
If
So-
every
so-
single
so-
person is trying
Okay,
to
true
like
though.
It is very
be
true.
a better person or maybe be
Like
a better
maybe that's how
person
you
so they can
start.
go.
Maybe that's how you start becoming a better person. But I think if it never becomes something that you just want to do or something that you just do, and you're only ever doing good things to
I mean,
get
I-
to heaven. And
You'd rather have a reason to do
Okay,
so than
but-
not do it at all.
For the past 2,000 years, the church has said be a good person so you can go to heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I don't see why me taking that perspective as soon as I know that there's a heaven is any less worse than the billions of Christians who have lived.
I'm not saying it's
I'm not
worse. I'm
saying
saying
it's
it's
not.
also bad for all those people.
yeah, I am too.
And you as well.
Then that's a total betrayal of Christians by the Catholic Church over time, right?
100. I mean, that's.
And
like,
if they say
yeah.
they can communicate with God, then
Yeah.
how are they right?
I mean, you know, you're not talking to the only Catholic here is Crispi.
Yeah.
But what I'd say is that like,
Technically, me too.
oh yeah.
They're not
Catholic.
yeah.
Are you
not-
agnostic or atheist? Or what are you?
You-
Probably
you-
agnostic.
You
but-
weren't here for that.
I also have a quick question because there's a lot of
Yo, A or A.
this kind of like changes up like from like more religion talk to science talk. Do you think we can go over it. It really is fine. Do you think the conscious is just the brain, or is it a completely separate thing?
No,
So
I
your
believe
brain
it's
versus soul debate.
You guys gotta also talk about this.
About what? Oh, about this? Do I think the brain is separate or? Well, I mean,
Do
it
you think
depends.
there's a soul, or do you think just our conscious is
No,
just neurons firing?
It really depends because it's part of it kind of makes sense that there's a soul and you want to believe that, but then I just read the whole book on the brain, and the brain works basically. Well, they don't know 100% how it works, and that's the whole thing about why there's still room that there might be a soul, because people still haven't figured it out. But I read this book that was on the theory of how the brain works, and what it was saying is that the brain creates a bunch of maps basically, and then through the observations, through touch, through smell, through sight, it basically makes votes on what it thinks is the most likely maps. Right? When I pick up this water bottle, I feel it, and my hand can go down here because I have a map of what a water bottle typically looks like, and because my eyes and my feeling are making judgment decisions that this is
That's not a good judgment.
I want
not a good judgment.
Bad judgment
But it's
decisions.
still, the brain does fit. No, that's the thing though. That's why sometimes you missee things or mishear things, is because the thing that your brain is perceiving is voting on wrong things based on the senses that are coming in. So there's the whole thing that. And if that's the case, well then you are just what your senses are, because that's how you're seeing everything.
Yeah.
But again, that's just a theory. The fact that we still don't know how the brain works may mean that there's something.
Well, at some point, everything is a theory. Like with stuff that we don't know about.
No, they can figure. They'll be able to figure it out.
Do they have a scientific explanation for just thoughts, or no?
It's literally the map thing where it is neurons firing, and it's
Well-
between the synapses is where you have your memories and where you have your
Yeah.
and where your like, maps of your brain of the physical world. So kind of.
Well, no one's answered the consciousness question.
No one's
that's
answered
just
yeah.
no one's answered that.
Like, what is it?
Yeah, even the book
Is
was
it
like,
more
I don't
just
know.
If your brain stores memories and you're basing decisions on memories, then
Well, it's not even. It's like the thoughts that you have, like the internal voice inside your head, the existence of like you were saying earlier about how you could be reincarnated. Like that's the idea of what is you.
yeah.
That's something that I think about a lot when I consider the question of like, why do I see through my eyes
Yeah.
as opposed to like seeing through Winslow's
Yeah,
eyes
sure,
or like
yeah,
anything
yeah.
else? Because like the perspective I have is different than.
If you saw through Winslow's eyes, you could get a much higher up view.
Oh no.
Do you mean like his physical eyes, or like
Because your eyes are in your head.
or
so
do you
that
mean like
would
in a
be
metaphorical way, like I want to see through your eyes?
No, I mean like, why am I in my
That was
body?
that-
Oh, okay. 'Cause I said more to like because they're in his head.
I mean like, why am I in my body? Why am I Jonah as opposed to like
Yeah.
John down the road?
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
they're two different.
Why are
if
humans
everyone has like
humans?
fundamentally the same like I don't know. You know more about the brain, but like one.
I think you know lots about the brain.
No, he knows more about the brain.
No, I think you are doing great.
But the brain is basically the same
Kind
Yeah.
for everyone. It does the same functions. It just stores like different things for different people.
Yeah.
So is that the only reason why we're all different? Like
That we just had
It could-
different
that could be-
experiences.
it's
Well, a
totally
lot
could
of
be why.
a lot of
Is
it's
it
based on
genetics and different
experience.
Yeah.
experiences? Just purely genetics and different experiences.
Yeah.
is that?
Or the brain, I think it definitely, your brain is something that can change over time. Like obviously,
Yeah.
we know because we're different when we're 2 years old than we are now. There's some degree of fluidity in.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, the
I-
big question too.
I
is
think
when
it
we're
is
all
the
born, right at the instant we're
So
born, are
nature
we all
versus
the same?
nurture.
Yeah. Are we all the same
Well,
person?
we're not because
You're
genes,
not.
but
No.
Well,
that one I
yeah,
can answer
yes,
for you.
Genes. Yes,
Yeah.
genes. But the
Like,
way
identical twins can
Thoughts.
be different.
Yeah,
Like, they
super
have different
different.
thoughts, so
Yeah.
it is not just
No,
genetic.
with
Do
separated
you think
with
this-
separated twins, they end up crazy different just because what happens is based on the experiences you have, it'll activate or deactivate certain genes.
Interesting.
So that actually
Cool.
is,
That's really
especially when you're young. So that is one of the things that determines who you become is whether or not like if you have loving parents that'll activate certain genes as opposed to other ones. So it has a lot to do with upbringing.
Something on that though that I think is interesting. This is in the Sam Harris book that you were reading. It's that people after severe brain traumas can have different personalities afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's
So
that's
then
an
what-
argument for the brain holds a conscious.
So then, what is the
Because,
self?
If
If you can have a different personality after a traumatic event here.
You have a way different personality after.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So just
So what is
that
the
evidence that
traumatic
your brain is
event?
connected to it?
There's a
Yeah.
story
I'll
of this
do
guy
that.
who gets a rod stuck in his head and like that.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
heard of this.
Yeah,
story.
He's in a
like-
mining shaft or
Yeah,
something,
exactly.
yeah.
And it becomes like an abuser after.
Yeah, and he was
after.
like described as really nice.
Yeah, before.
So, what are you?
I think that's the question.
Binary.
I mean, taking it solely off of like
Transition.
traumatic experiences and injuries changing your personality, it's all about how the brain's makeup is. If we're just taking it based off of that,
No, it is because
Yeah,
he lost part of his brain. That was the part that has to do with kindness and emotions.
And if the brain is directly connected to consciousness, death, technically the definition is just your organs all shut down, so your brain then would shut down.
and that's it.
If they're connected, then that would
No.
more be an argument that that's it. Right?
Not this isn't really ethical per se, but it'd be interesting to do an experiment.
You definitely can't do that one.
Two infants.
Well,
And like
That's
they have
worse.
totally different genes and give them the exact same growing up lives, same exact experiences. So like you'd have to be a very close environment.
So like Truman Show.
extremely close.
Yeah.
Oh,
I-
that'd
like
be
it's
cool.
like they'd be the
I
exact
thought you were
same.
gonna kill them.
I thought you were gonna kill them.
No, but
You ever watched the
that's-
Truman Show?
Is
How
it
does
ethical?
that help
Is
anything?
it ethical to kill people to answer some of these questions,
What?
What if they make someone flatline and then like resuscitate them?
or just kill them and like see what happens?
There's a movie about people who like to do that.
If
They
they,
did.
if they volunteer.
So
I
you were just
don't.
talking about like seeing the influence of nurture, right? Where it's like
Yeah.
two very different people, similar households. They did a reverse experiment that you guys probably heard of, like 3 Identical Strangers. There was a documentary recently.
Oh, I
3
did see that.
triplets. They were separated at birth. Was
Oh,
put in an
right.
upper class
Yeah.
household, middle class household, lower class household, and they saw how they turned out after 25 years.
What were the
Yeah,
results?
which was an influence, like a question about nature, right? Like
What
how
were
does
the
that-
results?
Do you know what the results were, or is that
Or
just-
nurture.
They're definitely different.
They were different, but startlingly similar.
Because genes have. I'm just curious, like
Despite
Could the
their
nurture-
upbringing, they were still
Oh, that's
remarkably similar after 25 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
But you can imagine of like if, like how like we organize society is like at least in America as a meritocracy, in a lot of ways. Like ideally, although it's not always like this, the best people will get wealth or live good lives, and the people who are less hardworking or less smart won't. But if all that is determined at birth, like is it still ethical to organize society that way?
So you're just talking about like predetermination, like everything's predetermined.
Not that everything's predetermined. No.
Yeah.
Someone have a tag.
Yeah.
Did you?
Take on you.
Well, now that we got sufficiently off topic,
Okay.
We should probably change up
We
the
should.
topics pretty soon. But no wait, who got a tag?
I had
No.
a tick and it like fell off me and it was just on the floor.
Oh yikes! All right, well.
okay, sorry for that.
You want to do a full tick check on camera?
Tick check.
Like, let's just pause for the tick.
What up? What up, all the viewers?
We
Can you help
encourage
us
our-
look for ticks?
So we encourage
We're gonna
all
show.
our
We're gonna
viewers-
show all of you our legs. Put it in the comments.
Who has a
Who
tick?
has a tick?
Rudge,
There are 6
did it
ticks
fall
hidden in
on
this
you, or
picture.
did you pick it off?
Well, I flicked it off.
Where's the tick?
It wasn't.
But it wasn't-
attached,
it
though.
wasn't-
It was,
okay.
it was crawling.
Where was the tick?
It was over
On
here.
my legs.
Well,
That's interesting.
now
Well,
I'm
they went for a walk.
Yeah,
And now everyone's gonna start feeling itches on their
Tick
legs.
check.
It's all.
Do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah.
All right, who's next?
This is
Do we got any good transitions?
I don't-
Anybody? No.
I mean, I had one, but
Well, what's coming next?
Well, we always
Simulation.
Simulation. Anyone?
Well,
we like
this
to try and do a cool transition.
Cool
Well-
transition.
They talked a lot about consciousness in the recent game, Cyberpunk,
so maybe we're just computers.
something,
2077.
2077. And in that game, people can upload consciousness to a computer, which makes us wonder, what if we are all just consciousness?
I've seen this like scene in the movie on TikTok about
Yeah, the Netflix show coming
Yeah.
out or something. Yeah.
So that was a great transition.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense.
Very pithy and clever and funny.
Yeah. Also, we are so running over.
Yeah, no, this is gonna take a
But, like,
while.
Wait, how many sections do you have left?
We're halfway done.
Oh, what?
This and then time travel.
God was legit. That was a real
This
That was a
one
good
watch.
conversation.
Yeah.
Time travel will be shorter.
So for my
I'm sitting
segment,
around this whole time.
so theoretically, are we all in a simulation?
You guys can leave.
You guys can leave.
Yeah, you're
You
like,
guys want us to leave?
No,
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 we don't.
no.
But like, if
you're
you
welcome. You're welcome
It's
to
up to
stay.
you.
no, if you guys want to leave, you can.
You really
We
reinforced
genuinely
this
have no
getting rid of
conviction at
it.
this point.
Yeah.
Like, all-
Nobody's watching.
no one clicked in the first place, but everyone who did clicked off.
Yes.
Yes. So.
But no
just-
one clicked.
But.
What if there's like one viewer?
Well,
We had 2 on the last one.
yeah.
Dedicated viewer.
A lot of people watched the first one. You got a lot of watch
Yeah,
time.
I did.
There was probably 10 times more watch time on the first one than the rest of the episodes
Yes.
combined.
There was like 160 viewers on the first one.
And like there was a
Anyways.
decent amount of hours too.
Yeah.
But you guys can leave. You want.
But actually one thing, if one of you becomes famous later in life, people will come watch this.
Yeah,
This is
100%.
true. And
What up,
watch
guys?
It has gotten to the point where if you type Steezcast into the YouTube search bar, it'll come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We're
But is
the-
that
we're
just
the, we're
is
the
that
most
just
subscribed
because
to
we've
Steezcast.
Is that just because we've
We do have a competitor.
Like,
There's another
I did it on the
Steezcast.
mom's computer. It worked.
All right.
Really?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about simulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
The argument goes like this: one of 3 things is true. Either humans will never develop the capabilities to simulate a reality like ours. Humans will never want to. That's the second option. The third option is we're basically guaranteed to be living in a simulation.
And that's if we do develop.
So, in other words, if you want to deny that we're currently all living in a simulation, you have to deny that either humans will ever want to make a simulation or that humans ever will be able to make a simulation. Because once we do, it becomes almost guaranteed that we are.
Now, here's the question: if like there were like some other species that made a simulation, why haven't we found holes in it? Because like no one's perfect. There
Why
would
would
be
there
like
be
at
holes?
least one hole in the simulation if a being
Like a
made it.
glitch.
No, Crispi.
Like a glitch. Like
Yeah,
Ever seen the
Crispi's right.
Matrix?
we've been here a long time. Like
But maybe there are, right? There's like UFOs. There's like, sometimes you
why
like-
aren't those just
Sometimes you see crazy
You
things.
see crazy things.
You're gonna see like videos
You
of
ration-
basketball players doing
Deja
stuff.
vu.
The exact same thing
Yeah.
at the same time.
Alright, this might be just
Columbus
you
Blue
guys
Jackets
might make
scuffed
fun
the
of me
10
for this,
billion.
but deja vu, I can't explain that.
That's
But
another.
that could be reincarnation.
Or maybe.
That's what the explanation of that is. The brain trying to make connections to stuff that hasn't actually happened.
or
That's
A
the
lot of
whole-
times
that's
when
the whole
you-
voting thing, and then you vote wrong.
And a lot of times when you
This-
have deja vu, it's something that you've never experienced before, but you just think you have.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's
Crazy.
been like you had a similar thought in a dream. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like, you've had a
I'm
similar
like,
dream
what?
before,
Like,
and then
I've
you're
totally
like,
been
Another
here
tip?
before.
Yeah.
It's more
I can see
convincing.
that.
Or I mean, in other,
Dude, actually,
it also
yeah.
could be that you're just rationalizing holes in the simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rudge had another tick.
Oh my god, bro.
Really?
Where is it?
It's right there.
You come on a podcast and have ticks.
We invited you one time.
You invite you one time, then you have ticks all over you.
Now I'm like scared about ticks.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, be scared.
I am.
That's just toxic.
The ticks.
The ticks are indeed toxic.
Anyways,
Sorry, Ben.
Yeah. Well, that's basically the argument. So.
I mean, what we were talking about yesterday with the whole like Sims argument, where
Yeah.
like it's way more likely if
Yeah.
if one group was able to make simulations, it's way more likely that we would be part of the simulation than the actual group that made the simulation. Right?
Yeah.
If you want to explain that more. But.
So it's the way it's been argued in the original like simulation paper by this Oxford professor was that if you think of the game The Sims, when people play, they invent not just one sim, but they'll invent a village or a series of sims, and you create a lot of games. Which means that if humanity or some other species was trying to find something else about, and they were using our reality to do it, they would likely create a significant amount of simulations, and very quickly there would be more simulated realities than real realities.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're just playing the probabilities, it's more likely that we're in one of the simulation than it is we're in the original timeline.
Well, how would we have gotten into the simulation in the first place?
People put us here.
Yeah.
We're just
We're just
programmed.
coded.
We're just
Yeah.
coded.
There's no
So then-
explanation for why we.
So then,
how
when we
started,
think we
so-
have choices, is it really just like a list of options that we can choose from?
Well, I mean,
Probabilities.
it's
Are we ever
probably
really
probabilities.
free then? We're not really free.
No, or we are, or we're just a coded. I mean, look, our brains are probably created genetically, and
For
then
decision making.
For decision making, and our brains make decisions through firing neurons, synapses, all those things. So it wouldn't be any different if we were just coded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about like our brain is a program for making the decisions we make.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely very likely.
So
that we have this.
theoretically, the simulation could have began like 5 years ago, and we just all have coded memories of what happened before then.
Like,
Or
what
the
if the Earth
simulation.
blew up?
Or like what or time is just a product of the simulation.
Yeah.
But
So-
what would the purpose of that be? Like, why
Well, we
would
don't-
they exist?
Well, that's a good question.
For games.
And would we be the only simulation, or are there other simulations out there?
Well, if also was thinking the other day, once as humans we figure out a way to we simulate consciousness, it becomes very likely that there will be many different simulated realities by the species that decide to do it. Because again, like let's say on our timeline, there's eventually a future group of humans. They're very likely to want to know the exact history of how they got there. So let's say they could design a program which would simulate things that are happening. That would give them a massive amount of knowledge about how humans used to work or how humans do work and what would happen if they code a certain set of scenarios in the simulation. So it's likely they'd want to do that a large amount of times
Yeah.
because it brings them knowledge and they can just observe how the simulation works and how it ends up.
Also, like just the fact that things are very convenient. Like if we're not a simulation that isn't programmed like very efficiently, all of this is very convenient. If it just like
Well, that ties back to the God argument.
that happened that's more to the God argument. But I mean then the whole God argument is like if we are simulation, then our simulators are the gods technically. That would give us an explanation
Right.
for what everything.
If you die, do you like wake up from the simulation, or do you just like?
Or you just code.
Or we're just code. There is
Yeah,
no
it's just
you.
like,
The code
no.
ends. You die.
Yeah.
There's no reason to keep processing your brain.
Like, yeah, like did they base all of us on different real people
Maybe.
outside the simulation,
Maybe not.
or were they just like, this seems funny?
They could just be observing. We could all just be one giant experiment.
Or I mean, look. The other thing is with what we know about like machine learning, right? Like
Yeah.
when they like Google codes bots to like do things.
Mm.
They don't necessarily know how it if they give like a artificial intelligence like a set of parameters and things it can do, and they for example will tell it like figure out how to walk from point A to point B. They don't know how the artificial intelligence will figure out how to walk, but they know that it will. So we could also work like that in that these simulators don't necessarily know how we're going to end up,
Yeah.
but that our brains have a certain set of parameters that allows us to do things, and we then
And that's
go
what
about
we
our
have
lives.
to learn how to do.
And so that's the
something.
problem solving aspect of it. Like I watched a video
Yeah.
the other day on you guys know the game Quap.
No.
No.
It's
Yeah.
this game where you have to make a guy run
Yeah, I
using
know.
using
Yeah.
Q W O
So
and P
difficult.
on the keyboard. It's so
Yeah.
hard, and this guy made a bot and it went to try every single combination of the 4 keys to get the guy to run. And in any case, he didn't tell it how to do it best. He let it figure it out by itself.
Yeah.
So is that like what
Yeah,
it would
exactly.
be like? Where like it would they gave us some like directive, which is like survive
Yeah.
and like let you figure out how to do it.
Well, something else is interesting is like Google made 2 bots and had them talk to each other, and they ended up creating basically their own language
That's
that the
cool.
Google programmers couldn't understand.
Oh, I did see that. That was
Yeah.
really cool.
So are we gonna get taken over by robots now? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, right now probably
We
not.
could be
Oh, then maybe
taking
we're
over-
All they
robots.
figured out,
Maybe
like-
we're robots.
It's like all they figured out how to do was like a couple words, and like we've created pretty
Or we
complex
just
languages.
could
So I
also
think we're
just be
ahead of them right now.
simulation inside a simulation inside a simulation.
That's the other thing.
Yes.
That's
Once the simulations become developed, and the simulations can make their own simulations.
Yeah.
That's
Then
why
the probability
it's
is
almost
exponentially
certain
increased.
that we're living in a
Exactly.
simulation.
So somebody said yesterday 50-50. I definitely wouldn't agree with 50-50.
Well, it's 50-50 until we
Because
prove
we
that there's-
still don't know that it's possible.
Yeah, to make a
To
simulation.
make
Yeah.
the simulation.
It's not. It's not like. Don't think of how you feel. Think about like pure statistical chances. It's still kind of false science, but pure statistical chances. Until you know, you don't know.
Well, it's the thing about consciousness, right? Until we understand what consciousness is, we can't assume that it can be simulated,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
computationally.
Exactly.
So when was this study that you mentioned? When was it released?
Well, it's not a study. It was just like a paper of a guy sort of asserting stuff. It's in 2003.
Remind me what year The Matrix was released.
Before that.
Right.
1990.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it based on The Matrix, or was it like?
No, I think the guy's just sort of like, this is he didn't mention it. He's like, this is a fun little thought experiment that the Matrix gives up, but here's why it's actually likely. Was sort
I'm
of.
pretty sure the whole idea for the Matrix came off a paper like this.
Yeah.
Like
I think it did. I think
I
there's-
for- I-
like these thoughts were out there.
Yeah.
But since 2003, we've definitely made way more strides towards simulation.
And it's exponentially increasing what we're
Yeah.
able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that like he was thinking this before we even. There was no simulations then, right? Or
Like,
Not to the degree that
not
we
to
do
the
now.
degree that we have now. So it's like kind of
well,
interesting.
the other question that I sort of had on this is, let's say we find out we are in a simulation, how should we act? Because once
Does it matter?
Can we get out? Is it like the Maze Runner where you get out?
if we're all coded, then no.
Yeah.
Like if we don't exist outside of it,
Then you can't get
Or you could then reassemble this code wherever or however you pleased.
Yeah.
But how would we get to like? How would we even
No
What is it-
freedom.
what-
crack our head open and start recoding? I don't think that will work.
Well, what is consciousness?
Well, I think maybe we'd spend too long if we knew we were in a simulation. We'd probably spend too long trying to get this freedom that we maybe hope there is, but
Or maybe you would just
accept
put yourself in a new simulation when you're about to die, and then just keep doing that.
So what would I don't know, I just had this thought. So what would happen if like all the code that determines your brain was put in some system that like wasn't necessarily attached to your body? Would you still? I think you would probably
Could
still.
you still
That's
control it, or
that's
is it a
just
different
technically
entity?
consciousness.
Well, I think you would still probably experience reality exactly as you experience it now, because there's no guarantee. Like the things that we see don't have to be real for us to experience them as real.
Yeah.
So maybe nothing would change.
I'm a little lost on that one.
Me too.
So let's say you
I'm also-
all the code that determines your brain and your consciousness was like put in an entirely different set of was literally just existed in a computer program. Would you experience reality the exact same way as you do now?
Well,
If you had all the capabilities,
Like,
like
we
if you
have
had
our
like
senses?
touch and
I think so.
smell. And
Well, if our senses are just inputs in the computer program, we don't actually need the real stimulants to
but
exist.
you need the appendages and the abilities to grab and feel stuff. Like
But
if
we
you're
don't,
just
we don't
in a
need,
computer,
but we don't need them to be real. We can
We just-
still
we just need
experience
to
them because
feel it
we just need to
like
feel
they're
like they're there,
Yeah.
and then our reality wouldn't change.
No, I agree.
That's weird.
It's a weird question.
That's pretty trippy.
Yeah, I really don't like that.
I don't like
that
that.
at all.
Oof.
At all.
You just
But it's
go. You
really
just
not
go.
that. It's like not that different from what we have now.
It's totally
yeah,
the same.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the only
just
thing
like
upsetting
yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
There's just something upsetting about
It's just
that.
a
Either
Like
different-
there could be no
How we
floor,
experience
like
it.
no chair that I'm sitting on, but like I could feel the floor with my feet in my brain.
When you say there is no chair, you're assuming that like
Well, that would be in the event that it like.
yeah. Well, you're
Guidance
assuming a
translator.
certain set of assumptions about what matter is, and that like that it is real. It's like I don't know. But anyway, when old humans like 2,000 years ago first like came to the conclusion of God, they started like dedicating our lives to it.
Yeah.
Like if we ever found out we were in a simulation, would we or should we start trying to?
I think we would, but I don't.
think we would.
I like.
I don't
what
think we
what
would.
good would it do?
I
Well,
think
let's
people
say-
would try to use science to figure out
Well,
more
what-
about it.
yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
we just
What
worship it.
we need to know what the simulators were trying to accomplish, and would we
Exactly.
help
Yeah.
them
Or
try to
fight
accomplish
back.
their goal, or would we fight back?
Well,
or
I
would we
think
just do nothing because we're just computers?
Mm-hmm.
I think if we figured out that we were in a simulation, then their goal has ultimately failed because their goal, if we are in a simulation, is to see how we act. But
Or
if we
maybe
know
their
that
goal
we're
in the
a
simulation
wanted
is to
that.
see how long it takes
Or
us to
maybe.
figure it out.
In
We
which
don't know
case-
their goals. Let's not assume
Crispi's
here.
coming with the fire.
I think, and given that, then the primary thing that would be done would be to try to establish a connection to the simulators.
I think that's
to like figure out what the goal is.
You be okay with them?
Yeah.
Dap them up.
Yeah, no,
And
no.
be like, yo, give me super.
I definitely think it would change a lot of how people.
We would have to.
Well, like, how do we even fight it though? Like, we can't shoot.
They literally
we
could
can't
just,
shoot
like, press the
missiles at like.
delete key and then we'd be done.
They
So,
might
like,
do that at any
They
moment.
could Thanos snap us.
really.
You've made like a silly mention to a Marvel movie.
Every single
episode.
Okay, I'm about to make a
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
So now, speaking of transition. Speaking of the simulation, time travel.
Yeah. So what I what?
Marvel does time travel in their movies.
Sometimes.
Well, yeah, no, I'm gonna bring that up.
They did
but
do that.
what I kind of wanted to do is go through a couple different scenarios of how time and time travel work in different media and see what your guys' opinions are on them.
Okay.
So first one is Back to the Future, where time is not predestined. Every choice that you make is your own, and so therefore you create a fate for yourself. But if you travel back in time, there's the butterfly effect that then affects your future.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's like sort of the origin of like the grandfather, not the origin of it obviously, but the grandfather paradox.
So if you go and kill your grandfather,
What
you
happens
die.
if you go and kill your grandfather?
Exact.
Because then
Your
you
father's not
exist
born
in
And that
the
would
same
be, that would
place.
make sense, right? Like
But
It would
like,
make sense. 'Cause
well,
then how, if
But
your
if
grandfather
you
died,
never existed in the first place,
you
how would
couldn't-
you have killed him?
You couldn't have gone back in time to kill your
Yeah.
grandfather.
Oh, what?
Is that a new one to you?
I don't know why I hadn't thought about that. Like, what? That's,
Wind came in here without baseline knowledge of time travel.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense. Anyways.
Well, no, I mean it doesn't make sense. Is the point of it.
because then like,
yeah.
is your grandfather actually dead, or you did, or just did nothing happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Or would it just be impossible to do that?
Well, it's
Or
literally
is it-
unanswerable. It's the point.
You're
Of
Well,
it.
yeah.
impossible.
Maybe you're just stuck in an endless loop. Then like your grandfather dies, but then like you never born, so then he's like is it just a cycle? A
So
glitch in the system.
then there's the MCU where time is demonstrated as, let's say, like an infinite line, right?
This is like when the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, exactly. When you go back in time, it doesn't affect your future, but it creates an alternate reality and an alternate timeline where like the effects of what you've done
Which
are
is
demonstrated.
equally as real, right? They're equally
Yeah.
real timelines.
I do.
Yeah,
Well,
they're identical until
So it's more just
that
like a parallel
moment.
universe type. It creates a
Yeah.
parallel universe.
And
is
and same thing as
just
Darty Darko.
one
Okay.
In that case, is there one timeline with a bunch of branches? Or
Yeah,
is there
I think
just
it's like a starting
Yeah.
point.
like
and then-
multiple timelines that they're
Well,
No,
it-
there's one timeline, and then as soon as, let's say, someone goes back in time and alters something, that creates an entirely new reality that was the same as the original one until that moment.
I think that's more plausible than the whole grandfather killing thing.
I just don't know if it's.
I mean, you still run into the same paradox
Yeah.
problem.
I don't know if it's theoretically possible to travel back in time, which is easy.
But we
to
just
say.
haven't invented.
But I mean, like
We don't know what time is.
based on
Exactly.
based on relativity, though, if you are thinking based on relativity, theoretically, you could travel through time. If time is warped, because
Yeah.
if it's just like a sheet,
yeah,
and like it's warped,
This is
technically
Einstein's
you could
theory,
fold it and you could cut across quickly, rather than taking like the actual like
Yeah.
time.
This is the
So,
Brian.
but can you
Cox.
go
The-
backwards?
Well, we can
theoretically,
go back. I think we know you can go forwards, but
Yeah.
theoretically, not that it's doable, but that you theoretically could.
Theor-
But
yeah.
could you theoretically go backwards?
Exactly.
and
That's
and
the
theoretically,
question.
if you move fast enough, you're experiencing. I mean, time is just for us. It's just a construct. Again, it's just a
Yeah.
theory. We don't actually know how time functions.
Yeah.
So,
Here's our final guest of the day.
oh
Our
yeah,
final guest.
Dash, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. What's your favorite ice cream?
What animal would you want to be?
Human.
Human.
What if like Dash just knows all the answers? I don't know.
I want to
The
be
newest
baby
questions.
on the answer.
Yeah.
then you
Alright,
forget
Dash.
it all.
No, it's-
What is time travel?
Imagine if we could upload. I'd rather like your face. Imagine we could upload like dogs' consciousness.
Or hear how they
What
think?
Rick and Morty? Or like where?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
The dogs are, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but what was I talking about before?
Relativity.
Oh,
Basically, because
relativity.
we experience time differently, moving at different speeds. I mean, that's Einstein's whole thing. So, let's say like have you guys all seen Interstellar? I actually haven't,
I get
but
that.
I know
I know that.
I know the bit where if you're traveling fast enough, since you experience time differently, let's say you go out on a mission to wherever and come back, you will be younger physically than your counterpart.
Well, it's like they
Earth.
go. There's a scene where they go onto a planet that's particularly close to a black hole, so it's
Yeah,
warped
yeah.
time in.
Yeah.
Is that the tsunami place?
The tsunami
Yeah,
place, and
yeah,
in the tsunami
It's
place,
where
they-
that
every
astronauts
tick
are in
is-
the ocean.
there are astronauts in the ocean. And they're there for about 2 hours.
But it was like 40 years on the spaceship.
But for them, it's in slow motion. So when they go back, no one got that one.
I
When
got
they
it.
go
I
back
got
to
it. I got
when they go back to the ship, the guy who was still on the ship and not within the realm, like the close to the black hole, had aged like 40 years.
That movie confused me, for being honest. The ending, I was
I
just
never
like,
saw
is
it.
that what
I've
happened?
been meaning to. I heard it's good.
The ending, they
I
just
know
like
they
were
all
in
left the
drawers
show.
or something. I was
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
I got
The
confused.
one
I
guy behind.
was like, what
The
just
whole
happened?
thought was they would leave the one guy behind to figure out the relativity problem and the gravity
Oh,
problem,
really?
and
And
then
they got stranded on the
when
island.
they got stuck on the
planet.
island, so the guy ended
Planet.
up aging like 40 years, and it
Oh,
didn't actually answer the
yeah.
problem.
And then they look through.
And
I should rewatch that movie.
No, the
That
book-
could be a rewatch.
That could be
It's
wrong.
such a-
It's
It's
such
just a long
it's
movie.
like 3.5
It was
hours.
very
But
confusing.
we
I
didn't
would not.
It's so long.
Speak for
It
yourself.
just turned into
Yeah, like a
it
circle
turned into a
thing.
conversation like this.
Yeah.
I was just
I don't see
confused.
Which is
Stop.
fine, but like.
But it'd be like I said,
We've already
Pulp
done it.
Fiction's trippier.
yeah.
Not
Not true.
I don't think it's trippier. I think it's
It's
just
better.
weirder.
That's better.
Then there's an entirely different idea in a book that we read in middle school called When You Reach Me.
Oh,
you two
yeah,
didn't read
yeah.
it, but
That
it's
was a good
it's
book.
essentially that going back in time. It relies on the idea of predestination. Going back in time is fulfilling the future. So you are always going to, if you develop the ability to go back in time and exist there, and like there's nothing that you can do to change that. You're merely fulfilling what your fate is going to be.
The new Christopher Nolan movie works that way.
Tenet?
Tenet.
I haven't seen Tenet.
Yeah, that's really good.
So
Is it?
Makes
no,
no sense.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense, but it's really good.
My
Even the
parents walked
explanation-
out of it. They were like, I don't.
Even
I
the
enjoyed it,
explanations of the movie, like on YouTube and stuff, make no sense.
When I watched it the first time and was like no clue. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, read like the plot summary, watched it a second time, and I was like, this is really cool.
It's
should
still
watch
like just the whole concept.
But no, but trying to wrap your mind around the forward and backward in time thing is really like it's really fun.
because like you're still going through time.
Yeah.
It's all.
You're going forward.
The
through
way
time, but-
time travel works in Tenet, which is actually relevant to the conversation, is that you can go forwards and backwards through it.
Yes.
But as you go forwards and backwards through it, the things that have happened have always happened that way and have already happened.
Yes.
So it's predestined.
It's predestined. You can't change but you can't time travel because you can't go to a specific point. You can go backwards through things as things are going forwards through time. And so when you intersect the backwards people and the forwards through people, things happened for both timelines that are the same.
So you kind of like almost
Which is-
pause time and let it go ahead of you, so then that's how you travel back?
No, you're literally traveling backwards through time. So the clock's moving forwards. For a person, the time could also be traveling backwards on the clock.
If time is a line, you have one person going this way,
One
them
person going that
way, but nothing changes.
Nothing
It's still
changes
just-
because they're both going through the timeline, and so the things are happening
Yeah.
for them originally.
And that means that
That
you,
makes sense.
it's not like the same thing as when you reach me where like your younger self, you as a physical entity are separate from time.
Yes.
So you can exist at any point, but that'll be the only you that's existing.
The only explanation they give is that your entropy is reversed.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah,
They
that's
don't-
all they say.
They don't
that's a
elaborate
great
further.
explanation.
That's because it's a 4-hour movie with like so many plot points that every conversation is like 20 seconds, and then just stuff explodes, and
It's
then you have
very
another 20-second
complicated,
conversation.
but-
And the sound is also mixed terribly, so it's impossible to hear what they're even saying in the conversations.
One final theory about how time works that I'll share is that time is, I mean, I think this is probably the trippiest one, kind of the coolest. Every moment in time is happening constantly, simultaneously to every other point in time. So this conversation that we're having happens over and over and over forever. And at the same time, you've got, let's say, like the Civil War happening at the exact, like, I'm gonna say at the exact same time, but that doesn't really make sense.
So
Is it
question.
just like a parallel timeline? type
Question.
thing?
No, it's like-
Everything's going on at the same time. We're just
Question.
experiencing.
Yeah, it's almost like, sorry, go ahead.
We have math, right? Between every like finite distance of like numbers, there's an infinite numbers in between.
Sure.
So there's an infinite amount of moments
Yeah,
happening.
In between each
exactly.
one.
And
I
it
don't
just
know if I
happens
like that.
over and over again.
I don't know if I like the infinite amount of things happening constantly for an infinite amount of time.
Yeah, no, well, I mean,
My brain's not a fan of that one.
Well, what you're saying? I think Einstein's physicist saying this. I might be totally wrong.
Tell me what Einstein said.
I don't
Einstein's saying that
Or
like,
I mean,
you're
you said it.
like if yeah, this is totally my theory, guys. If what Winslow's saying is true, you'd technically be dead for trillions of years and not been.
you're
dead for
dead and
trillions.
alive at the exact same moment.
I'm alive and I'm dead.
Wasn't
You're
there a whole,
alive
like,
for very
wasn't there a whole
small-
Schrodinger's cat thing that was like that can't be true?
Well, yeah, I think
Well, that deals with different realities.
Schrodinger isn't that's a response to one of Einstein's things, or to like the when quantum mechanics are first happening, first being solved, it's interpreted in a way that it is consistent with Einstein relativity, and I think
And I think
Schrodinger's
that can
cat
make
is
sense.
explaining why that can't be right,
Yeah.
because the
I
cat
don't
can't
know
be
that
alive and
theory.
dead.
Yeah.
What's the theory?
So,
is it complicated?
It's about like
Essentially, what happens is, based on Einstein's whatever the theory that he was trying to disprove was, if you put a cat in a box, and like with a tripwire and a vial of poison, if the cat moves, it will trip the wire, and the vial of poison will spill, killing the cat. Based on whatever theory this was, if you put the cat in the box and you couldn't see it and you didn't know what happened, you both had to assume that the cat was alive and dead because both possibilities were equally likely.
So it's like once they're figuring out like quantum mechanics, it's like electrons have a superposition and then a probabilities of certain positions they can take. So if both of the probabilities, if there's a 60% chance an electron is in an instant in one position and a 40% it's in another position, it's possible that there's a probability that the cat is alive and dead simultaneously, which can't be right because we know that the cat is alive in the way we interpret it.
I'm very well.
I didn't explain that well, but that's
It's
it.
okay. I don't think
it doesn't actually make sense because it can't be right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's
Which is
wrong.
the whole point of it.
It's why the original interpretation of quantum mechanics is wrong, and why we.
I get relativity more than I get quantum mechanics.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, the point is we don't get
We
quantum
don't get
mechanics yet.
anything about quantum
As a
mechanics.
species, we don't get it yet.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the whole point of that experiment is to confuse you because it can't actually make sense based on what the definition was.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it did that job.
Cool.
It really,
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
did.
Well, and then it proves that it's right
Um,
or wrong.
I don't know if it did the job like for the same reason as we're going for. I'm just confused just because I'm confused.
I
know.
Not
Yeah.
because of the actual theory.
No, trying to figure out what they mean by like electron positions is not something that I
Yeah,
recommend
when you
anyone
said
undertakes.
superpositions, I was.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think it's something that like is actually understandable for like our brains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We just
one-
don't have enough processing power.
One thing,
Get it.
if time is infinite, right, then why have we not seen any time travelers?
We might have.
Or
Maybe
how
the
how could it have been
disguise.
possible?
Well, if time is time started with space.
With
Big
Okay,
Bang.
with the Big
theoretically
Bang.
They're
Big
connected.
Bang.
Yeah.
Well, time began when space began.
Yes.
It can't exist without space.
Yes.
So, I mean, then it's probably. I think it's also possible space is finite or time is finite.
That's
So like
true.
one day, it's just like that's it. That's your lot.
Well, it's like there's a
space
theory that like
disappears.
there's a theory that after the Big Bang happens, there will eventually be enough mass to start pulling the universe back in on itself, and then it'll return to the original whatever
we
it was.
don't
Maybe
know.
there will be another big
We don't
bang
know,
once
it's
it
like
collapses.
billions.
It's billions and billions and billions
Perfection.
of years.
And there are three theories, and
Unless we're
one of them has
Rudge.
it collapsed, and two of them, one of them kind of has it collapsed, not really, and one of them, like they don't even know if it'll collapse.
Okay.
It's just a theory.
I'm not gonna worry about it.
Yeah.
They don't.
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's not something that's on the list of things that might kill you.
Yes. I don't know.
I'm very confused.
If any form of time travel makes the most sense to me, it's the whole wormhole thing with in combination with relativity. But
That's just
Theoretically-
because Brian Cox explained it to you.
yeah, I love Brian Cox. He's great. And go check out
When Brian
there's
Cox
no
pulls
one-
out like the paper with the pencil on the Joe Rogan podcast, that was pretty cool.
But I mean, that's technically it's impossible as of now. Like what he described, this is not my words, is that like it wouldn't be possible to travel through
To
the
travel
wormhole
through the wormhole.
because a wormhole is too unstable. You'd have to make it stable. Theoretically, he said like geometrically it works out, right? Like that could happen. You could have this, and then you just have a wormhole between. But for that to actually, for you to be able to warp space like that and make it possible, you'd have to like have things that like don't exist. Like he mentioned, like negative pressure or something.
And you'd have to also like exist in a higher dimensions
Yeah.
that we can't even
Yeah,
comprehend.
you can't
Yeah.
comprehend a fourth or fifth dimension. I guess it's time technically fourth dimension.
Yeah, time is fourth dimension.
What's fifth dimension? Do we know? Or just anything?
There are 10 of them.
It's very
Well,
difficult for us to
technically,
like
for
actually
string
know.
theory to work, you
Yeah.
need to have 10. But like
Maybe there might be many, or there's infinite, or there's not.
We can't like fathom it.
Or that dimensions are just
So-
something we invented to like understand the world, but they don't actually exist.
Just like religion.
Just religion. All right. Well, now that we've effectively confused all of
Before,
ourselves,
if you want some really trippy movies to watch on time travel, I mean, do Tenet or Interstellar.
Arrival.
Also, Donnie Darko, Arrival,
Donnie
and
Darko's the
the
best.
show Dark on
Arrival
Netflix.
is time travel?
Yeah.
I just totally
The whole language that they develop is about time travel.
yeah,
I should rewatch the movie.
that's a good
I
one.
I have
Rewatchables.
He's like, I watched the whole movie and didn't get that.
Well, I mean, I just remember the only thing I remember is there's like an alien dude, and they tried to communicate with the alien dude.
Yeah, the aliens are coming from the future, and their whole language is about interpreting how time travel works.
Okay.
That's
Anyway, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt.
So since we've all become sufficiently confused, and this is actually our
Definitely
longest
exhausting.
episode ever.
Not
by-
by that much.
Not by that much.
By like 6 minutes.
Yeah, but like
But
we
I'm
also didn't
definitely
start it.
I'm more exhausted than I ever.
But that
I-
took more out of the brain.
Yeah,
than most of the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. I mean, I was out during the simulation, bro. I didn't
Yeah.
say anything.
Is that payback for me not talking during your last segment?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think that's where we'll wrap things up for today. Next one, we're gonna do rewatchables.
Yeah. We still need to pick what movie we're rewatching, but it'll be a good one.
Yep.
I promise.
So
Maybe the B movie.
The
No,
capitalist
the very-
structure of the B movie.
Yeah, that's the B movie is very much so
A rewatch.
aggressively capitalist and the rewatchables.
Awesome.
Alright, well, I think we'll leave it off there.
If you made it this far,
You haven't.
props to you. I could not have.
And if you made it this far, why?
Like, do you not have anything better to do?
You
with your time?
you gotta have
have
something
to have
better to
something
do.
No, actually, if I'm, this is like, there are definitely people who would like listen to this, watch this one.
Yeah, this is more interesting.
This is more interesting.
Is it that we're just all giving takes and then realizing that
Yeah, but
it's
it's
like
cool
none of us know
a
what we're
hard
talking
maybe?
I don't know, but it's cool. to listen
Like if
to.
you,
Yeah.
any question in this entire thing could be answered with like maybe.
Questions
Yeah.
are more fun when they aren't answered, I think, or left unanswered.
Yeah.
If you have a
Okay, before we start another conversation,
no,
we gotta
let's-
end this.
to wrap things up.
Podcast is now over.
Thank you.
Alright,
Pleasure.
thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you to our guests.
Yes.
And Rudge.
And Rudge, but he vanished.
Rudge went to go find more ticks.
So fast.
Okay, the text
Alright,
situation.
thank you. See you next time.